This is the Black and White Pod,
I'm Matt.
and my name is Dave. And one of the things that we both love is a nice, tight, connected universe with which to immerse ourselves in and explore through this wonderful medium of the comic book.
Oh, you're going a different direction with that, if I'm being honest, but it's okay.
Well, you'll have to tell me when we're done recording what direction I was going in, because I can't imagine where else that would be.
Absolutely.
But that's neither here nor there. I care so much about continuity of the comics that I read. I think you do too.
Yeah, for the most part, I would agree.
But should we? Should we care about it? Does anyone else care about it? I don't know. But let's talk about it.
Absolutely. So I think that we're in for the long haul. So I'm doing I got to crack one for a little after dark black and white. So
Matt Blue this week,
world's finest. Okay, Dave. So I think before we even have that discussion, when you say continuity, there might be some new listeners as well too. When you say continuity, I think it's important that we frame the discussion like, what are we actually talking about here? I think that's important for us to have on the table, so to speak.
Is that a question you're asking me to answer?
That's a question I'm asking you to answer, yes.
So, to me, I feel like that question applies in different amounts to different topics.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is like the way you apply continuity conversation to Marvel and DC is different than, say, Spawn universe or Invincible, which you've mentioned a bunch of times on this show, or even things that are sort of newer, like the supermassive universe that's coming together, and there are a lot of smaller publishers. Valiant Comics, when they came back 10 12 years ago, they had their own little self-contained thing, and there's, to me, I think it just means that if something happens in one issue of a comic that is set in the same universe as another issue of a separate comic, the thing that happened in comic A still happened in comic B.
Okay.
So there's consequence to what takes place in every issue, and there's a domino effect. If one thing happens over here, there's an effect that happens, here, here, and here, and maybe even over here in 3 or 4 different comics. It doesn't necessarily have to, but I don't want to pretend like it didn't.
And you feel that is what is going on in current. I think for the sake of right now, for the sake of this conversation, we're going to talk about Marvel and DC. And I'd say you feel that there is no continuity in Marvel and DC for the most part.
Sometimes there's not, sometimes there is. And again, it's even within the big two, it gets kind of character specific, like look at the Miles Morales Spider-Man. Like, it's a single issue comic. It's not a universe of books. There's not multiple Miles Morales comics that come out every month, even though he's part of the Champions team. They don't, to my knowledge, there's not a current Champions book right now.
I don't think
so. He's just in Miles Morales Spider-Man, one monthly comic. And if something happens to Miles and his comic, it should be relatively easy to let that be quote unquote real in every other issue of every Marvel comic.
Got you.
But with something like, Avengers, a team book, or even like the Spider-Man books, some of those more prolific and popular characters, not only is it harder to maintain that continuity, I truly don't think anyone cares about maintaining. By anyone, I mean the people creating these comics. Not.
Got you. I think us as the readers definitely care about continuity more than the editors or whatever. And I think you made a really good point about character specific continuity. I think you as a comic book fan, you have to kind of have your own like headcanon, I guess. And I feel like
I like that.
I've gotten like better and better with that, just with entertainment and everything. Kind of, I pick and choose what I like. Just kind of like moving forward, it shouldn't be that way. It should just be relatively tight. I would love for it to be that way, but that's not how it is. And like, I can't remember who told me, but it's like these adventures that these superheroes are having, like we're picking them up every month, but like you have to think like this is only a certain number of hours in their day. And when I kind of thought about that, I'm like, that does kind of make more sense than like Wolverine's over here. He's doing this, he's doing this, he's doing this. With that said, though, for example, in Marvel, your current favorite line of books, the X-Men books, right? So during the Hellfire Gala, I'll just use this as an example. During the Hellfire Gala, they were unveiling the new team. It was like this dinner party thing. They were unveiling this new team, and they were on Earth. They were on Krakoa. Yep, they were bringing all these heroes to Krakoa to check out Krakoa. And Jean Grey was like telepathically like they were talking about the new team or they were unveiling the new team or talking about something, and she was telepathically there. So and then like I think it was either the same issue or it might have been the following issue. I think it was the following issue of maybe Planet Size X-Men or whatever. But Jean Grey was also on Mars. And this was not like some projection or something like that. Like the editors literally dropped the ball. She was on Earth on Krakoa, but also on the same time on Mars with a different team. That is just lazy writing. And when you're charging someone an editorial, when you're charging someone $7 for an issue, that is not acceptable. Like it isn't. I think it's. I just think it's lazy.
You know what? I actually don't think that it's lazy.
Okay, what do you think it is?
I think it's just carelessness.
They just don't care.
It's not laziness. It just doesn't. It doesn't matter. Did you stop buying X-Men books after that?
No, I bought a couple more, but I'm ending.
But you're not ending because that happened, right? You're ending because you're not enjoying the comics.
Yeah.
That's like they don't care. So what? They put Jean Grey on Earth and Mars. That not a single person was like, I'm not reading these X-Men books anymore because they put Jean on Earth and Mars at the same time. Because they don't care. They don't have to care because no one has made them care by calling it out and going, I'm not going to read these comics anymore. And you know, that's an extreme example. I don't think anybody should stop reading a comic because of that. But I think it's also it's kind of the landscape that we are in now, and you know, like it or not, I don't think continuity matters at Marvel and DC because we're going to keep buying the comics, like regardless. To your point about having your own headcanon, I think that's a really good way to put that. You know, you have your own kind of timeline of events that you reconcile for yourself, and that's how you let yourself enjoy the comics. And even that's sort of a depressing thing to think about when you really
it's like, a depressing
go back to
state,
layers
man.
on it. Yeah, like really isn't that great that we have to do that. But at the same time, you know, I don't know if I have a better solution. Like these characters now have been around for 70 plus years in some cases. Like, what are you supposed to do? Like you can't age these characters because that they'd all be dead, except for you know the ones that don't age and the ones that are immortal, whatever. But most would be dead. So you have to do something to maintain interest for the reader, while at the same time having some relevance to previous events. I think that's hard to do. The longer we all exist, the longer that that the Earth turns and takes its annual trip around the sun, the harder it's going to be to please comic fans that want the past to matter and be relevant in the present. It's a hard thing to pull off.
I get where you're coming with. I get where you're coming from with that point, but like I really don't think that most people care to that extent about like the aging of. I think the aging thing is like different. Like there has to be some suspension of disbelief. Like
Oh,
You
yeah,
have to,
for sure. I
like,
mean, because you can't.
that point, because like Tony Stark is in Vietnam, like that's not, there's no way. Magneto is a,
Yeah, I mean,
product of the
Frank Castle
Holocaust.
was
Like there's,
also in Vietnam. Like
yeah,
that
like there's,
dude would be almost
that's
dead now. Like he
exactly.
can't
So
be
like,
20 years old in Vietnam in the 60s and just be running around the streets of New York City today like he's 30s. Like, work. And I get that, but there's also, you have characters now that they're having children and their children are
yeah,
aging. I mean, even I mentioned Miles already. When we first got introduced to Miles, he was like 12 years old, 13 years
yeah,
old
yeah,
when
he's a
Bendis
man.
created him, and now he's like 17 or 18. But Peter
Yeah,
Parker hasn't gotten any older in that time. Like we create children for these characters so you can have the dynamic of father, son, brother, mentor, whatever, and you have to age them to tell that story. And then they're going to get to a point where they have to stop aging. But where do you stop with a character like that? And how do you make it make sense? Like that. And I kind of, even now, I'm confusing myself. Like this whole conversation is about being chronologically confused.
yeah. I feel like if people are going to take it to that extent, like you don't want to lose any fans, but I'm just like, I feel like the people that are that into it, like that's something within itself. Like me personally, what I'm looking for, I'm just looking for some consistency, like across the board. Like I'm I'm not talking about stuff from 1960 and 1970. Like those major events, like you need to major events of the character, you cannot forget that stuff. Like the death of Gwen Stacy, like that is an inherent part of Spider-Man's, character and not his origin, but in the early-ish days of the character, like those events can't be forgotten. But if we're literally talking about what color his shoes were in this and what was his favorite soda shop, like that's not what I care about. I personally care more about a cohesiveness amongst books, kind of like you were saying in the beginning. If some major event happens over here, like they don't even reference it sometimes. And like the other title, whatsoever, or a character
Or the
looks
secret.
completely different. Looks completely different.
Don't
Like,
forget the secret reboot where we kick off with a new number one and forget the last 12 to
yeah,
37
and that's
issues. I mean, that's the stuff that really pisses me off, to be honest. When we
yeah,
just, we go like 20, 30 issues, then we restart it again and go, oh, it didn't happen.
yeah. So is
Okay.
that is rebooting and renumbering. Like that's probably another conversation, relaunches. We can talk about that. It definitely has a part in this continuity conversation, but like New 52, whether you hated it or not, for the most part, it was kind of like a line wide reboot, except probably Green Lantern and Batman. They still carried
I
some
mean,
of
they
that
carried, but
continuity
that
over.
made
Like
sense,
it made
like
sense.
what they
Like,
did made sense.
yeah. So
I loved New
like if
52. That actually got
me
me into a
too.
lot of DC stuff that I hadn't been reading and had no interest in reading because it was a jumping on point.
Me too. But when it was so, if it's like a line wide, if you like wanted to make things contemporary, like you're talking about, like a line wide reboot. I like New 52. I wasn't really reading for Rebirth, but what I've heard, a lot of people like DC Rebirth as well too, because it kind of went back to the older continuity. Fine, you've reset the floor, you got it, but like you got to have a cohesiveness in books. And I think one of the main issues why we don't have that cohesiveness is we legitimately have too many books. You get the same previews I have, you look at it, we ain't probably buying a lot of that stuff, but like the fact that the DC catalog, no joke, is like 75% Batman or Batman related characters is a problem.
Well,
It's a
I
problem.
mean,
Like,
we could spend a lot of time just talking about what's wrong with DC. Wanted to, honestly. I
but
agree
like
with you. I mean,
that's
I do think it's not healthy to have majority of your line focused on one character, but at the same time, that's also kind of what I've been pining for, is something that is like focused and a little bit smaller and tighter. However,
so
there are so many Batman books that there's no possible way the dude can be doing all that shit at the same time.
exactly. That's where you just like, like there's no way. And that was
Yeah.
how Wolverine was kind of in the mid two or 210, like 2010s. It was the same thing. Like there was like 10, not nearly as bad as this, but there was like 10 Wolverine books, and you're like, He's on X-Force. He's an Avenger. He's got 2 solo titles. He's like, there's no way that this character can be all those different places. Granted, Wolverine sells, Spider-Man sells, Batman sells. Like, DC is putting themselves in a bad place, man. This is a bad path that they're on, because people are going to get burnt out of Batman. Like, it's a bad path, and not focusing on any of the other characters, man. I'm scared for that company. Like, I really am.
Didn't Discovery just buy Warner Brothers?
They did. They're merging.
Yeah, I mean, they've got to merge, but like the acquisition was Discovery acquiring Warner Brothers. Like, it's a merger, but
yeah, thanks.
Like,
yeah,
Warner Brothers was still purchased.
Yeah,
like the same way GameStop and EB Games merged in the 2000s. Like, GameStop bought EB Games, but it publicly was a merger, and it did merge. One bought the other.
Yeah, there's. I was listening to some podcast stuff. Like, they're already axing the VP. Like, the VPs on the Warner side.
Yeah.
Out.
Yeah, which, that always happens when you have something like this.
Absolutely.
So I want to back up a little bit when you're talking about all the different Wolverine books and how there's so many Batman books. So another thing that I think damages the continuity of a character is when they go and do these mini series, or sometimes it's a maxi series, go 12 plus issues, 10 plus issues, where we're telling a story set sometime in this character's past. The Untold Tales of Spider-Man, Batman Year One. Like this, there's only so much stuff you can go back and tell. And at that point, a lot of those stories can't possibly be things that happened in the quote unquote real or regular continuity. And every time one of those things takes place, I mentally have to kind of like pull myself out and go, hey, and none of this stuff really matters. Like, just read the characters that you like and hope that it's a good story with decent art, because at the end of the day, in 10 years, what you're reading probably isn't going to matter and get retconned out potentially anyway. So really, who cares?
So are you talking about just like Marvel is doing a lot of those, getting the older creators going back and kind of filling in gaps? Are you talking about those kind of things? Are you talking about like
any of that stuff?
Origin?
Anytime you go back to tell stories, untold stories from a character's past, because the writer wants to write a story about when Peter Parker had the symbiote suit, when he was in the black suit, and you go, oh, we never told you this story. Guys, come on. Like, Peter doesn't have time to do all this stuff. You're telling me all this stuff happened while he had 4 monthly books wearing the black suit when those were being published come on. Like, I know we have to suspend belief, but you can only stuff so much into one space. And at that point, you're really, what they're doing is asking the reader to accept that continuity doesn't matter. Not when it's Marvel and DC.
My first public swear is they got to do that, because their normal book for the most part is dog shit. That's why I pick it up. I buy Spider-Man, but it's not the Beyond thing I just read that whole Beyond thing. The ending I liked, it was good, but it did not take 18 issues to get to that point. We could have did that in 6 issues.
But Spider-Man's my favorite Marvel character. I have
dropped it.
Hundreds and hundreds of Amazing Spider-Man comics, from the late 100s, early 200s through a few months ago. I have every single Amazing Spider-Man. And
that's crazy, man.
Stopped reading that comic after the Nick Spencer run. The Nick Spencer run ended so spectacularly bad, in my opinion.
Yeah,
couldn't keep going with it.
Well, I didn't mind it, but you could definitely tell there was definitely I cannot debate you with that quality, because that dude was like, peace, I got this Substack money, I'm out. Here's this like ending. He was building towards something, but you could tell towards the end it was like, I'm out. And yeah, I feel like that's why they're revisiting those old books, because like the old heads like that stuff. The fact that like that Ultimate Fallout 4 reprint, the month it came out, was like the number 8 book. That's a sad state of affairs.
I don't know what you're talking about.
the first appearance of Miles Morales is one of those facsimile editions. They reprint the old books. Those facsimile books sell better than like their current titles. And like it started out as like one a month. If you look at previews, there's like 2 facsimiles a month now. Every month, there's 2 of them because these books sell. Because there were, I mean, people are nostalgic for sure, but the quality is
topic
just
we
not.
discussed often on this podcast is nostalgia.
We
comes
do.
up every week. I feel like every other week.
We do.
Maybe. I don't know.
And I'm not gonna say I will never be one of those people that are just like there's nothing to read, but like you definitely have to be
too much to read.
More selective. You have to be more selective about what you do. Like I love the X-Men, but like I'm getting out. I'm not loving it. But Donny Cates is killing it on Thor, so I'm gonna read Thor. And I'm not a Thor guy, but it's a well-written book. You know, like that's where when they've had you by the balls for so long, it's tough to break up with them. It really is. But like, you have to do it. It's I go through these waves every few years. You know, I get a bunch of stuff, then I get dissatisfied, and I keep you keep moving on. So,
so yeah, I have. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was going to talk about your point about continuity and like should we care? Like getting back to what the topic was, but go ahead.
Well, I was gonna kind of do the same thing, but not. So I've got some ideas as to why we are where we are, and I think
I'd like to hear
that the popularity of the Marvel Cinematic Universe has factored into this in some not insignificant way, because those movies did so much for comics. That brought so many new people into the superhero fandom. And I'm not saying every single one of the people that found superheroes for the first time through those movies is reading comics, but some percentage of those people found their way into a comic book store. Hopefully the shop owner was not rude to them because they didn't know what they were doing or looking for.
And took their credit card payment for one book.
and then made them feel stupid for not wanting to buy the comic.
See last episode, that's continuity.
Exactly. See how easy it is? See how easy it is? Take note, Marvel, DC. They're never gonna hear this, but anyway. So some percentage of those people wanted to read some comics. Now imagine you've never picked up a comic before. You've not sat down and read one before, but you watched Iron Man, Captain America, Thor. You got the payoff from that Avengers movie, and you were so stoked about, wow, I want to go read some comics. And then you show up to the comic shop, and there's like 800 issues of Avengers and 800 issues of Spider-Man and 600 some issues of Captain America, and you're like, where do I begin? And to solve that problem, I think what you have to do is give people some self-contained things that aren't self-referential, aren't going to call back to things that happened in 1984 or 1974 or 1964. You know, you let them kind of stand on their own with good storytelling and good art, and you make it more accessible. And I don't know if you remember this, but when that Avengers movie came out, there was an Avengers series called Avengers Assemble, written by Brian Michael Bendis.
Oh, great art.
It was, self-contained, not in regular continuity. They're fighting Thanos. Like, that. I mean, I think that those movies really impacted the way that continuity is addressed on the creative side, at least at Marvel, and probably to some extent DC, although DC has tended to just do their own thing and do full line reboots and half boots and retcons and cosmic treadmills and 15 different Green Lanterns. They do they've got their own
little salt there. No, I remember that Avengers Assemble book. Bendis and Bagley, dude. Mark Bagley was on a lot of those issues. And I was like, this is dope, man. Like you really didn't need to know everything. It was just Hawkeye looked like the Hawkeye from the movies. Like it was a cool series.
I hate when there's a movie that dictates what
changes
my
the outcome.
comics look like.
Yeah, but you understand why though. Like you understand why they did that, obviously.
I do, but I hate it.
Though you don't like it. Yeah, I mean you could not like it.
The way that Peter Quill now has to look sort of like
Chris Pratt.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
like Peter Quill was never blonde. All of a sudden, dude's blonde in the comics because Chris Pratt played him in a very, very popular movie or two.
Yeah.
That's the kind of stuff that, you want, like, we're not explaining away why Peter Quill's hair color miraculously changed in his 30s.
Gosh, I forgot my thought where I was going with that, but you brought up a really good point about that, like that synergy and cohesion, and they lost it now. Like that was the time to I don't know, make their own little pocket universe like the movie, but they have this gamer verse for all the video game books. They should have did like a cinematic verse of those characters. I guess I was thinking not so much like that, but kind of like the Ultimate line, like its own thing that was intended for other people to jump on. Which
except
the Ultimate line, but then and then it mutated on it and became something completely different. But like,
well, they had such a good thing in Miles Morales, and the decision was we need to have him in 616. So let's kill the Ultimate Universe and bring over the characters that we think will do well.
Dude, I remember when Bendis said, the day we merge the Ultimate Universe is the day that, we've run out of ideas. And he was on record saying that. And well, there we go. So
here we are.
So, yep. So I was going to go in a different direction. I don't know if you have, I guess like my thing is like you're bringing up solutions. Like we've done a lot of complaining, but I think we brought up some solutions. Your movie verse idea. When all this stuff was going down in DC,
that was your idea. You said that, not me.
Okay. The bloodletting was going down at DC, and everyone's getting axed and whatever. They went through 2 rounds of layoffs or whatever. Like that's bad. I don't want anyone to lose their job. Like I really don't. But the one thing I was hoping that was coming out of that, and one of the rumors was like, they're going to pare their line down to like 15 books.
They did 15 Batman books. What do you want?
A week. But like, if they pared their line down to like 20 books a month and it was tight, dude, like,
yeah,
there's too many books because there's just no coordination. I think there's like somewhat coordination within a siloed universe. Like I think the Spider-Man line is actually pretty good, but it's just good within the Spider-Man line, not the whole overall universe as a whole. Back in the day, like if you wanted to use Batman, like you had to come talk to Denny O'Neil to say like, oh, this is how Batman is being written here. Like he needs to be consistent. That's definitely not, that's not happening.
Yeah, no, that's not a thing anymore.
Like, there's these group editors are not like that. So
I think part of that is the way that people consume media is different now.
Yeah.
That there are so many ways to enjoy a Batman story.
I agree.
Than just reading a comic book. And back then that was probably your main source for a good Batman story was a comic book. And now you got video games, you got out of continuity comics, you've got in continuity comics, you've got digital stuff that you can just go back and read old stuff if you want to. You've got movies, you've got tons of animated movies, you've got animated series, multiple animated series.
Yeah.
And on top of all that, as people like us continue to age, these companies also have to think about how they're going to sell comics to Gen Z and whatever generation coming after Gen Z. I think it's like Generation Alpha or something. Next generation already been named. But these are kids that are growing up with iPhones and iPads. They do most of their media consumption via YouTube and TikTok, and primarily TikTok. So now you've got people that they consume content in even smaller bites than we do. There's no shot someone like that is going to just dive into thousands and thousands of old comics, figure out what happened before the comic they want to sit down and read, because they don't probably care. And I don't say that to generalize an entire generation, because I think statements like that are oftentimes short-sighted and usually born from a place of ignorance. And I don't want that to be the takeaway. But I think that those companies need to think generationally. Otherwise, they could be seeing the millennial generation as the last big spender on comics from month to month.
I don't think you're saying that dismissively. That's like that. Those are factual statements. Like it's becoming the attention span and consumption. It's just changed. Like even if you just say they're moving to more digital formats and quicker things like that, that is. I don't think you're saying anything inflammatory when you say something like that whatsoever.
I agree, but I mean, you know how it is. Like,
you don't want to completely generalize it. There's always going to. I was the latecomer to comics. I'm that guy. I'm the guy that they like want, like based off of their movie. My buddy I was not a like comic crazy kid or whatever like that. I came in my 30s. I'm that unicorn that doesn't come around much. So there's always
your 30s. When you get into comics.
I was in my 20s. I'm 20s.
We've told the story on this podcast.
Yeah, 20s. Before. I didn't mean to say 30s. I meant to say 20s. But yeah, like most people don't kind of get in their 20s. They get in when they're, I guess a little bit later. But yeah, I think you're right, man. There's so many different. Well, part of me is like, do they even care? Because there's so many different ways that you can get into these characters and these IPs. Now they're ultimately IPs when we talk about the big two. They're IPs. So like video games, movies, like that's where the money's made. It's not really made on comics. So
now, go ahead. Sorry.
Done. I'm done.
Okay. So I think there's an interesting anomaly present in all of this.
Okay.
I mentioned them already. Valiant Comics. Loved Valiant in the 90s. Valiant was a big deal in the 90s. It was very popular very quickly. It was an absolutely phenomenal self-contained superhero universe that had some characters that were set in very far distant future, 4000s, and things current, and a couple that were set in the past. But it was self-contained. They had some cool crossovers, good stuff. And then, like a lot of small publishers, they didn't make it, they died. They came back. And when they came back as a self-contained superhero universe. That wasn't all the same characters from before, but it was a majority of those characters. The ones they lost the rights to, there was licensing sell-offs that occurred, whatever. So some characters didn't come back when the universe relaunched itself. And I was all in. I was buying every single Valiant trade paperback. I didn't buy it monthly. I bought them in trade.
You got a sick bookshelf. I remember.
I do.
You had all, like,
I still have those.
Okay,
every single Valiant trade paperback I bought, and I was reading the contained Valiant universe, and I was loving it. And then, for some reason, they started to follow the Marvel model, and all of a sudden, they're rebooting books, starting with new number ones. They did this with a lot of things. They canceled some. They just started rebooting, and I fell off completely, because now I'm like, so does the stuff that I've just been buying, is that not matter anymore? Are we rebooting the whole line? Like what's going on? And I got so, I guess confused is the wrong word, maybe disillusioned, but I was just like, we weren't that far in. Like Exo Manowar was like their flagship title, is the first one that kicked off the relaunch. It wasn't like in the 30s or 40s or 50s maybe in numbering. Like it wasn't that far along. And then they've relaunched that book now like 2 or 3 times since then. And they went from publishing 7, 8, 9 titles a month. Now they're 2 to 3 maximum.
Yeah, dude.
And they're all miniseries now. Like
they're on death's door. I've heard really good things about Shadow Man, but Shadow Man's like self-contained. It's just like its own thing. Yeah. But yeah, that company's on death's door.
I obviously it comes down to sales numbers, right? Like everything else. something wasn't selling, so they had to try something different to bring in more readers and up the monthly sales. But it's such an interesting thing to me that they came back with such a strong desire to rekindle what was so loved about that publisher in the 90s and then abandon ship. And they
I think
didn't
there was a
I,
leadership change up top. That's why.
well, I guess
That's
that'll do it, huh?
yeah.
Guess
That's I
that'll
mean
do it.
that because like I remember like that Valiant. I wasn't like particularly reading that stuff, but I was like, oh, this is like a cool universe. And I flipped through a couple of the books, and then I picked a bunch of them up digitally. Like there's a sale, and I was just like Bloodshot, all Archer and Armstrong, all
I
of
said Bloodshot's another one. They've
Exo.
relaunched Bloodshot 3 or 4
Yeah,
times now too.
there's Bloodshot, and Hardcore. There's like been 4 Bloodshot
Yeah,
relaunches.
for no reason.
Yeah, Exo Manowar, yeah, Ninjak or whatever. But yeah, um,
And you know what's interesting too about that is that there's a they've solicited a new comic, and I should know the name of it. And I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's kind of like a Space Marines type of comic.
yeah, I know Ironclad or something.
Yeah,
It's like
Ironclads. Yes,
yeah, it's like
Ironclads.
Ironclads.
And the solicitation for number 1 said, exploring a new pocket of the Valiant universe. And I thought to myself, like, what even is the Valiant universe anymore? Like,
Yeah,
what? Because to me, to someone that's now on the outside of this, I just see a bunch of relaunches and miniseries, and for me, that is a sign that we don't have a connected continuity and we don't really have a good plan, and that turns me off. Like, I'm no longer interested in being a part of that. And it's, you know, it again, I've said the term once before, but I'm chronologically confused about what to do with Valiant Comics.
yeah, and it does like when you do a line wide, it's one thing, but like numbering wise, when it's like 1 year books is at 20, one's at 1, like the numbers even of the series they're all over the place. It causes for more chronological confusion, like you're talking about. Then when all the numbers are like within a couple digits of each other, you're like,
Yeah.
well, when does this take place? Yeah.
And I just like, picking up Exo Manowar Volume 4, number 3. Okay, well, where does that fit into the hierarchy of Exo Manowar's history since the relaunch? Like, I don't know, so now I don't care.
So now they lost you because that stuff was really strong in like 2011 or whatever 10. It was really strong, and the art was like not that it was the same, but it was like consistent. You could tell that it was like a cohesive universe. Definitely different. There's differences amongst the books, but when I saw that solicitation like 6 months ago for the new Ninjak series, and it looked like my daughter drew it, like no disrespect,
Harsh.
but like yeah, no crazy disrespect.
Man's going for next today.
No, but like that is not I don't know, whatever. It's not publishable comic book art, in my opinion. I'm all about different styles.
I think that's a separate problem from
art's a different
continuity. Like, I get what you're saying though. I mean, there should be a level of expectation within your comics universe that the art is of a certain quality, and when it misses, it's a problem.
When I saw that 2011 art, and some of those books were like painted and they look beautiful, and you go from that art, like literally I'm reading that over the summer, and then I'm going through previews and I see a solicitation for this book, and I'm like, what is this? Like, I don't know.
So I am the type of person where I prefer to have a tight continuity within the comics that I read. Why I'm reading less and less Marvel, and I only read Batman now, DC, and it's just the main Batman. And I search. I'm hungry for self-contained superhero universes. That's why I'm now getting much more interested in the Radiant Black, supermassive little connected universe. Why I loved Invincible. There were sort of 3 core books in Invincible. It was Invincible, Guarding the Globe, and Astonishing Wolfman.
Astonishing Wolfman.
And those characters crossed over, and things that happened in one of those books also happened in the main Invincible book, and vice versa. And it made sense, and I loved that. And that, I don't get that anywhere anymore. It simply does not exist.
Yeah.
If it does exist and I don't know about it, if someone could please tell me, please point me in the right direction. I already know about the Supermassive books. Give me something else good to read.
I mean, the other thing I think is Mighty Morphin and Power Rangers. I've heard that's got like they cross.
Yeah, I'm still on that.
Bit,
I'm like 6 issues behind, but
no.
But that's
like
to me
that,
that's not the same type. Like
you want
that's a licensed
characters.
comic. You know what I mean? Like it's based off of another of a TV property. I want original superhero comic books. I don't want to read Power Rangers. I mean, at that point, yeah, I could go read the TMNT books and I get the same thing. And I do read TMNT, but it's not like
you do read it.
That's not what I'm looking for.
I got you.
I want, for my superhero comics, I would love something self-contained. I'd prefer it be Marvel and DC, but I'll take what I can get at this point.
Yeah.
Fortunately, I ain't getting much.
Yeah, no, I think for those companies, there's just little pockets. If Dave was writing a book and Dave's writing 3 books, he's going to have his own little universe at Marvel, and then I'd have my own little universe. You're just not going to see that line wide.
And and when the next writer comes along and they decide they didn't like what we did in our books, guess what? It never happened.
Correct. So I think you got to hang on to and we've talked about this before, but I think the beauty of a finite series, I think that is something. Finite series normally lead to better work, in my opinion. When you don't feel like something has to drag on since the 1960s, it just leads to a better product. And I think I'm going to hang on to this Radiant Black Rogue Sun universe while I can. And Higgins was on Power Rangers before, so obviously he knows how to build a little bit of a universe. I have confidence in that. I wish there was something else that I think you can find it, and there's crowdfunded books and stuff like that, but that's not really what I'm looking for. I'm looking for something I can get a previews catalog, look at, and move forward from there. And the options are just slim.
I feel you. At the end of the day, every week I have something on my little message board behind me here, that ties into our topic for that week. And this week I kept going while I was thinking about this topic leading up to recording this. I kept going back to this thought of if they don't care, why should I? And I think that works from both sides of this. Like from the publisher side, if I'm Marvel or DC or anybody that's creating comics, I think we've shifted into a place where people like us that care about a tight continuity are more the minority than we used to be. And therefore, when your broader audience doesn't really care about tight continuity, why should I, the publisher, care? At the same time, as a fan of comics with a tight continuity, if the people making my comics don't care about creating a continuity for me to enjoy, why should I really care at that point? Like at that point, I just need to do some soul searching, find a way to enjoy these comics for what they are. And if I can't, move on and find something that I do enjoy, because life's too short to spend time and money consuming media that doesn't bring me some kind of joy. So at the end of the day, the question at hand, who really cares about continuity? Apparently nobody. That's kind of a sad realization for me. And maybe you disagree, but that's sort of where I'm at with this.
I agree. I think it's yes. I think life is too short, like you said. Funds are, no matter how much money you have, your funds are limited. It's a finite resource. You don't have infinite funds. Even Elon Musk or whatever, he has a lot of funds, but it's not infinite. I agree with you. I think life is too short. I think you need to find, if you're a comic fan, you need to step outside of your comfort zone. You need to find comics that interest you other places. the X-Men and Spider-Man and Batman and some of those heroes are being replaced by other independent heroes in my heart and other things that I enjoy. Crimson Cage by AWA was a fantastic book about 80s professional wrestling that I look forward to every month. And that has taken the spot in my heart of a Spider-Man or something like that. Like, You Will Be Okay. It's fine. You can dip your toe in every once in a while, but like, if you're not enjoying it, don't get that clutter in your house and don't waste your money on it. There's something else. Comics are not dead. You might just need to the brands that we kind of know and love. I'm not going to say they're dead, but they're in trouble. So you just need to.
I mean, their continuity is, that's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. So,
with that being said, appreciate y'all hanging out with us again. I know we didn't directly answer the question of who cares about continuity, but like with most things on this podcast, we find ourselves often in the gray area. Not a lot of these topics have a black and white response, and that's why we like talking about this stuff, because the beauty of comics and the beauty of the hobby is finding the things that resonate with you and that you enjoy, and then diving as deep into those as your heart, mind, or wallet will allow. Tight continuity or not, do what you like.
Do what
Talk
you
to y'all
like
next week. Take care, everybody.
Absolutely.